I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold and you're not. And none of them got that joke. Well, you guys didn't get it either. Right, Kaya? Okay. So if you watched television in the 70s, you would have got it. Okay. So today we actually have a very unusual lecture for me. Usual for other people, but not me. Right? So it's the unusual lecture because it's the end of the year. So I'm getting confused. I'm older than I've ever been. I've never been this old. Yeah. Okay, wait a minute. Now I'm older than I was when I said that. Wow. Okay, so today we're going to talk about your favorite chess topic, the Greek gift.
No.
Yeah. Who wants to explain that to me? You know what the Greek gift is?
Yeah.
You do? What? You know something?
Yeah.
Are you feeling okay? Somebody check his temperature. All right, what's the Greek gift? Explain to the class, and I'll shake my head while you're explaining.
It's like bishop takes on the king side, and then you like move your queen in check, and king moves back, and then you move your knight up.
Yeah, now you know why he's not teaching the class. Although everything he said was correct. He just, he doesn't have a chessboard, so he's got nothing. Very good. Now, whenever I teach anything, I have to give a public service announcement. Just because you know it doesn't mean it works, right? If you're like, well, my dad went to the bank and he took out $50. I guess if I go to the bank, I'll get $50. Now, they just call the police if you go to the bank, right? Well, you don't have an account here. You're too young. What are you doing here? That's not your account. Okay, and chess is like that too. When I teach you something, you're like, oh boy, I'm going to do that every game. No, and actually, I have a good example where it doesn't work. We're like, oh boy, the Greek gift. Then they resigned. So, okay. So first we'll see what the Greek gift is. Now, I went to many websites to check on videos and examples and all that nonsense. And some of the examples were wrong. So I was like, okay, I'm not doing that one. But some of these are right. Now, the Greek gifts, this is actually on move 7. Don't do that. This is pretty early. So this is your favorite opening, the French defense. Okay, and this is actually very common. Okay, now in this position, if two grandmasters are playing, then white always plays f4. Always. But we're not doing that today. So he plays knight f3. Now, black plays 2 terrible moves in a row.
Yeah.
That's the record. No, that's like average. A normal move would be c5 attacking the center. That's what anybody, like a high-rated player would do. Here, black plays bishop b4. What is the bishop doing to the knight? Pinning it. Can the knight move away? Is my sound on? I hope not. If I try to move my knight, my computer's going to make a weird sound, right? Because I would be in check. Now, some of you have played online before, right? When you play on your computer or you play online and you try to make an illegal move like queen here, can I do that? No, it just puts it back. It's like if I go here, it puts it back. If I go here, it puts it back. When you play on the internet, you can't make illegal moves. When you play in real life, on a real board, you can make illegal moves. And your opponent will be like, that's illegal, what are you doing? Or your opponent will say nothing. And the game goes on. That means if you're playing chess on a real board, you have to pay attention. Your opponent can be making illegal moves one after the other if you don't say anything. Right? Okay, so in this position, white does not make an illegal move. White plays bishop d3, and black makes a move that loses the game. It loses the game because this is the Greek gift lecture. Otherwise, it wouldn't lose the game. So he castles. Now, what most people do who don't know what the Greek gift is, they're like, oh boy, I want to attack on h7. So they attack h7. They play knight g5, which attacks h7. And then black will do something about it, or he won't. And then white maybe will go here, and so forth. Now, that doesn't work because black should do something about knight g5. Black could play f5, blocking the bishop. He could play g6, blocking the bishop. Or he could play h6, which stops white from taking the pawn and attacks the knight. Which move is best? I don't know. Let's see what the engine says. It says h6 is the best, then g6, then it takes this. It doesn't like, oh, f5 is terrible because I lose this pawn in my horrible. Terrible. Okay, so I have to play either h6 or g6, and white has a good position. However, when you're doing a tactic and you're trying to beat somebody and you can't figure it out, sometimes you can reverse the first 2 moves. Okay, and usually you do it in your head, and then if it works, do it on the board. So if you want to play knight g5 and then bishop takes check, well, you can't make 2 moves in a row unless you're a grandmaster, then you can. right? Well, you don't know that. You're not a grandmaster. Okay, so if I go here and I want to take on h7, my opponent will stop me, right? Okay, so instead, let me make sure, want to make sure, and I made sure. Okay, so instead, white makes the second move first. That's the Greek gift. Now, for those of you who are in history majors, they gave the Greeks the Trojan horse, the gift, and then they came out and they showed them, right? Aren't apocryphal stories good? No? Okay. It's all lies, but they're entertaining lies. And in the end, isn't that the real truth? The answer is no. So, and Simpsons, don't sue me. So, instead of playing knight g5 and then bishop takes h7 check, white plays bishop takes h7 check first. And what's that called, Kaya? The Greek gift. Now, another public service announcement. If your opponent plays bishop takes h7 check and you're like, oh no, the Greek gift, I'm going to get checkmated. I'm not going to take it. I'm going to play king h8. I see a lot of people do that. Don't do that. If you play king h8, I guarantee you have a losing position. You're down a pawn and your opponent's attacking you. If you take this, your opponent's attacking you, but you took a bishop. So if king takes bishop loses, and it does, you should still play it. Because I know king h8 loses. I don't know if king takes bishop loses. Sometimes it wins because your opponent doesn't have enough attack. Here, your opponent does have enough attack. And when I teach chess, there's two things I want you to do. I want you to do what I told you to do, and I don't want you to let your opponent do what I told them to do. And she's like, what? So if you can play bishop h7 and win, I would like you to do that. If your opponent can play bishop h7 and win, don't let them do that. So if you have black here, and you're like, oh, I'll castle. Oh no, they took on h7, I forgot. That's not good. So before you castle, you should see if the Greek gift exists, and if it checkmates you. If it does, then don't do it. So here, castling is a really bad move. If I turn the engine on, it doesn't say castles. That's not a move. It says c5, it says bishop e7, it says any move but castles. Then when I castle, this light, which is a really boring gray light, it turns a really bad color. What's a bad color? Red. Red means you made a bad move. And when I castle, the red light goes on, and it says bishop h7 is winning. Okay? Because the computer knows what the Greek gift is, or maybe it doesn't. Okay, bishop h7, black should take. Now how do we continue our attack? Right, knight g5 and a half. Let's call it that. Right. Knight g5. Now, I have a friend in Michigan, and whenever he talks about anything, doesn't matter what it is, chess, bridge, life, he says 9 times out of 10. He always says that. And when he says 9 times out of 10, and then he completes the sentence, unfortunately, he's wrong about 9 times out of 10. It's unfortunate. Okay, so when I say 9 times out of 10, I'm actually correct. But when he says it, it's not correct. Okay, 9 times out of 10, hopefully he's not watching this video. 9 times out of 10, when somebody does this and you have the black pieces, you should play king g6. And the reason is, if you play king h6, you're lined up with this bishop. You don't do that. Now white has a lot of winning moves. Knight takes is double check, and it's going to win your queen. And this also wins your queen, because it attacks your queen and attacks your king. So when you're lined up with the bishop, don't do that. If you play king g8, which looks safe, I go here, and then it's not safe.
And then you resign.
Well, you're going to get mated. There's 2 ways to stop mate. The computer way is to take the knight and give the queen away, because the computer doesn't want to get mated. The human way is to play rook e8. That way you run away with your king. The computer knows you can't run away with your king, because it's all the way to mate, so it doesn't do that. You can take this with check, and this is actually a typical thing you can do. And then you play this mate, because this pawn's not here, because you took it. Remember when you took that? And then this is mate.
Okay.
Right. If this pawn was here, then it wouldn't be mate, because it wouldn't even be check. So if we go back, and we don't play queen f7 check, and we just try to mate like this, that doesn't work, because there's a pawn here. So we take the pawn first, and then we do the mate. Okay. And the computer doesn't want to get checkmated, so the computer gives its queen away. Now, we don't want to give our queen away, and we don't want to get mated, so king g6 is a better move. Okay, now, this happens a lot, and in this position, we almost always have 3 moves. Which one is the best? Well, I looked at it, so I know. Queen d3 is one of the best, but the computer likes something else better. Queen d3 is the first move I would look at. H4, right. And the third move is queen g4. Those are the 3 possible moves. So I could go check, and if you get out of check, then I checkmate you. Right? Okay, so what's a better way to get out of check? Better than king h6. F5, right. And probably white's winning, but white doesn't have checkmate. But white can start taking things. Okay, white can also play queen g4. That's also very dangerous. In fact, I would take white here all day. However, the computer wants to play h4 because then the computer can play h5 check. Now, here's what's funny about this position. If you ever do something like move your knight, so you go, aha, I'm going to take everything. Rawr. Whenever you move your knight, black can play king f7 later. If you don't move your knight, black can't move his king anywhere. That's actually a good knight. It's stopping the king from escaping. So by playing h4, we're leaving our knight there. If black makes a silly move, that's tough. King h6 is forced, and there's more than one way to win. Of course, this wins the queen because you're in check and your queen's attacked. And if you don't like that, this also wins the queen. And if you don't like that, I could turn the engine on and probably checkmate you. Queen d3 is probably pretty good now with this mate threat. Queen g4 is probably good. Okay. Anyway, the point is this is winning for white. And the reason it's winning, and I'm going to get to why it doesn't win later, the reason it's winning is because in this position, we're going to play mate, and a really good way to stop mate is to play bishop f5. That's incredibly illegal. You can't do that, can you? If you could play bishop f5, which we will see in a later game, then it doesn't work. I stop mate, and you got nothing.
You can play g4.
Then I would go here. That actually is a game I'm going to show you. Yeah, you could, but you're not doing it. Okay. Now, if your opponent can play bishop f5, which they can't, then you're winning. If they can play bishop f5, the Greek gift doesn't work. That's just a regular gift. Okay. Now, a friend of mine who runs a chess center in Charlotte, he never gives me anything. You know why? He's Greek. That's the Greek gift. Nothing. Terrible. Thanks, Peter. Okay. He's probably not watching this. All right. So in this position, I have a question for the audience. Was bishop takes h7 a good move?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a winning move. Okay. And that's the Greek gift. This is like a simple example. I made it extra simple because these two pieces are blocking the bishop. And there was like no variations. After the king went out, we were really crushing him. Okay, and the important variation, this one with h4, if you play rook h8 to try to stop h5, you didn't stop h5. I got a queen on that, and I got a rook on that. If you play here, that's not good. I mean, it's good for white, right? Yeah, and king f5, that's too dangerous for me. I'm scared. G4 looks good. Queen f3 looks like checkmate to me.
Yeah.
G4 is also checkmate? Yeah, that's checkmate. That's checkmate. And when you're a grandmaster, you don't need to see 100 moves ahead. You just see a king here, and you're pretty happy with white. You're like, oh boy, the king's on f5, I'm going to win. Even if you don't see a win, you know you're going to win because you shouldn't do that. And I teach this also, not that my students ever listen. If there's something that you should do and your opponent isn't doing that, they're probably playing bad. For example, you should get your bishops and knights out, and you should control the center. Did anybody ever tell you to walk your king up the board in the opening?
Yes.
No. So if you do that, that's probably wrong, because nobody ever told you to do that. They told you to get your bishops and knights out in castle and take pieces and play in the center. So when somebody walks their king up the board, very suspicious. Okay, and this is why chess is a tough game, because if I tell you two things that are bad, like don't get checkmated, and you're like, all right, and don't give your queen away. And you're like, okay. But then you give your queen away and you checkmate your opponent. You did something bad and they did something worse. So in chess, giving your bishop away is bad, but getting checkmated is worse. So you give your bishop away, which you're not supposed to do, and you checkmate them, which you are supposed to do. And sometimes you have to make a decision which is more important. And I have a lot of stories. I've told this story many times, but you guys weren't here. You guys can go get a drink because you heard this story before. So I was playing in a tournament, and it was my move. And I could win my opponent's queen, but I found a better move. I played another move, and then whatever they did, it was checkmate. Didn't matter what they did. So they sat there, and they're like, oh, it's checkmate. So they gave up. When they gave up, some guy walked up I didn't know, and he said, oh, you should have gone here winning their queen, like the move before. And I said, well, that wins their queen, but my move, like, is checkmate. And they said, no, checkmate's not good. You should win their queen. And I said, checkmate's better than winning the queen. And they said, no, it's not. You just didn't see you could win the queen, and they walked away. I don't think they're playing in the tournament either. They just wanted to tell me what was up. Yeah. So if you don't know what's better than what, and there's two bad things, you might do the worst thing. For example, when your dad said clean your room, you didn't do it. And when he said don't burn the house down, you didn't do that either. Right? One of those was more important. Right? When I was a kid, let's see, I got to state this correctly. A relative of mine burned down another relative of mine's apartment.
What?
Yeah, I don't want to say who they were. But anyway, the truth hurts. Yeah, but he shouldn't have done that, should he? Yeah, but that's what happened. Okay, so not doing stuff is important, but knowing the importance of which is more important. Not getting checkmated is the most important. Not giving away your queen, that's probably number 2. And usually when I ask this question in a kid's class, I'm like, what's important in chess? And they go, ooh, castling. And I'm like, castling? What about getting checkmated? Nah, I don't care about that. Okay, so obviously, if you don't know what's more important, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Okay, Greek gift, you're giving a piece away, but, all right. Now, this is an actual game that was played 16 years ago, and I think you guys were there watching it. Yeah, right? Okay, now, your favorite cartoon, Bugs Bunny. Oh, that's my favorite cartoon. And I've told this story before, too, so you can go get another drink. Okay, although it is Sunday, so keep it down with the drinking. So, you'll notice Black is probably an Indian player, right? Probably. You see his name? Probably Indian. Probably, yeah. Okay, now, and White is a Russian player, Israeli player, who moved to Chicago. He lives in Chicago now, but not during this game. Okay, I assume Ubeda is in Spain, but it could be anywhere, I don't know. Anyway, in the Bugs Bunny cartoon, Bugs Bunny was about to get killed by the abominable snowman. Abominable snowman's like 80 feet tall, and Bugs Bunny's like this big. So Bugs Bunny started questioning him. The guy got confused, and then he ran away. So he's safe. Hooray. And Bugs Bunny said, what are the distinguishing characteristics of an abominable snowman? The abominable snowman didn't know what those words meant, like you don't, and he got confused. But he got confused. While he was confused, Bugs Bunny ran away. Now, why am I saying all this? I like stories. Because what are the distinguishing characteristics of the Greek sacrifice? We see them here. Can Black's bishop go to f5? No. Can White sacrifice on h7? No. Yes. Can the knight go to g5 legally? Yes. Okay. Now here, the Greek sacrifice doesn't work because this piece and this piece are defending g5. So there ain't no Greek sacrifice. Okay. White played bishop e4, just a random move, not related to the Greek sacrifice. And Black got worried. And this is why people make a lot of mistakes in chess, is because when they're worried about something and they prevent it, so they're not that worried anymore. And then they worry about something else and they look over there and they forgot about what they were preventing. Okay, that's called a Ken West. Ken West, grandmaster in St. Louis, grandmaster. He prevents his opponent's threat. Now his opponent doesn't have a threat anymore, so he forgets about it. So I just told you The queen and bishop are defending against the Greek sacrifice, and so therefore there's no Greek sacrifice. So black forgot about that, and he was like, oh no, my pawn's weak. The guy's going to attack my pawn. So he played queen b6. Now he's defending his pawn, defending his bishop. His queen looks pretty active, but it's not defending g5 anymore. Now we can't play the Greek sacrifice yet because he'll take our knight. So white played bishop g5. And now we're ready for the Greek sacrifice. And this is very funny. When you're a super grandmaster, this is an easy move to make. When you're low rated, it's impossible to make because you feel bad about it. We don't feel bad when super grandmasters, we just do it anyway. Because black just made a mistake and white's attacking on the king's side, black should admit his mistake. And he should play the move you would never play. He should go back because he made a mistake. So he should play queen d8. Now there's no Greek sacrifice and we defend our bishop. But who's going to do that and go back to d8? Nobody's going to do that. A computer would. A human doesn't want to do that. So the human, he took the bishop, and after knight takes bishop, he's going to deal with that. The problem was there was no knight takes bishop. What move did white play?
Bishop takes h7.
The Greek sacrifice. Yeah. So black had to help white. In this position, there's no Greek sacrifice, and black's like, let me hook you up. I'll move my queen away, and then I'll take and you can do your sacrifice. Now, he knows the Greek sacrifice. His rating's about the same as mine, but he forgot. He just assumed if I take a piece, white's going to take a piece back. So there's knowing something, then there's really knowing it. So he played the Greek sacrifice. Yeah. And if you play king g8, then, I'm going to go there. Man, it's harsh.
You can do king g6.
Yeah. Okay. So he did play king g6. That's correct. Yeah. Now, all those good moves that I showed you, they're all still good. And in fact, the guy who had white, who's better than me, and he's written many chess books, he didn't make the move the computer liked, and he won in 2 moves. And the computer doesn't like his move. Okay, the computer wants to play f4 and get this f pawn get some attack this way. Now, if you play check, I'll take the knight. If you play f4, now when I play check, you'll cry a lot. Yeah? Okay. So f4 is the best move. He played queen g4. I don't blame him. Queen g4 is pretty mean looking. And now, normally when you give pieces away, you're like, no, I'm down a lot of pieces, and you're mad. Well, these are the pieces that black has. I've never been less scared. Those pieces are the worst. Those pieces can't do anything. They're like blocked, can't move. However, these pieces, those are looking good. And this king, not good. Terrible. Okay, black played the move that I would have played. He attacked the queen. How did he do that?
f5.
Played f5, yeah. And you could take en passant.
Or you can
Do you guys know what en passant is?
yeah.
That's where he's like, no, and yeah, no. You can do this. Watch this crazy move. You've seen that before? Yeah, he looks confused. Yeah. Now, I bet on you if you play him. Okay, so yeah, the en passant rule is the most complicated rule in chess. There's 3 complicated rules. Castling, which you know. Pawn promotion, when your pawn gets to the end, which you know. And en passant, which 50-50. It took me like 4 years to understand it, but I might have a learning disability. But en passant means you have a pawn on your 5th row. This is white's 5th row. This is black's 5th row, right? Your opponent has a pawn that hasn't moved yet. That pawn hasn't moved yet. And he moves 2 squares, and they're next to each other. Now you can take it just like it moved 1 square, but you have to do it immediately. If you make some other move, now you can't do it. You got to do it the first time, right? And if you go to the internet and just go to like Wikipedia and look up en passant, they give you like 10 examples. Oh, they're all the same. Okay, and en passant's a funny rule, and when I teach beginners en passant, it's worse than not teaching them. Then they do everything en passant. It's all illegal. My knight takes your queen en passant. I'm like, what are you doing? Okay, and it was funny. I was teaching en passant in a class in St. Louis about 3 years ago, and one of the students said, I have a question. And they had a pawn on the 6th rank, and their opponent's pawn like moved, and they wanted to take en passant. And I said, no, you can't do that. And they said, but I want to do that. And I was like, what? I mean, I want to take your queen off the board, but it doesn't make it legal. Yeah, okay. So they were like, no, I like that. Let me do that. I'm like, no, you can't make up your own rules. So now in the National High School Championship about 10 years ago, 2 masters were playing on the top boards. They were the best players in the U.S. And they did an illegal en passant capture, and the other guy didn't notice. These were professional. These are like strong players, very strong. And then later they noticed what happened, and the director came, and they made all kinds of rulings. Then they changed the rulings. Okay, it was a big disaster. Then there were articles about it. Okay, but normally grandmasters know what en passant is. Okay, so after f5, white decided not to take en passant, and he moved his queen away, maintaining all of these threats. And now black, Britney Spears style, did it again. Can you believe that? He was thinking about one thing, and then he forgot about it and did something else. So in this position, black should play c5, and now that's a pretty good bishop. And still, white has a good position. But black blundered. Black played queen takes d4. This is a very funny blunder. The reason it's funny is the obvious move for white doesn't work. He knew that. He was trying to trick white. The obvious move for white is to go here, checking the king and attacking the queen. Now, when your opponent is a very high-ranking player, they probably see that. They're probably tricking you. What move can black make that saves his queen? His king's attacked. That's right. Your finger's correct. Yeah. Queen goes to g4. Yeah. Yeah, now maybe black is okay. I'd probably still rather have white. Well, let's see what the computer says. I think white's better. Yeah, white. Okay, so it's about equal. Yeah. Okay. Now, so that was black's plan. Black took a pawn, and black wants to stop the attack. Now, one thing that I teach a lot, is that pieces are lined up. When pieces are lined up, you can attack them all. Okay, so anybody know dominoes? Yeah, you push the domino and they all fall down. That's because they're lined up. If they were all scattered around, that wouldn't work, right? Okay, what's lined up? These are lined up, and these are lined up. Okay, that actually helps white quite a bit. When things are lined up, they're either lined up vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. When they're lined up diagonally, I would use a bishop or a queen. If they're lined up vertically or horizontally, you'd use a rook. Okay, however, if white immediately plays this move, which is fine, then black could play queen takes this pawn or queen g4 again, and the game goes on. So white played a brilliant move, knight e4 check. This was really nice because it's check, and he stopped the queen from going to g4. You see what happened there? Now this is very fascinating. You can move the king back 2 different ways. If you go back this way, you check, and if he goes here, you check again, and you're attacking the queen now. Now you can't save your queen. So he went the other way. He played king to f7. And now, when I line up here, I'm taking this knight with check. That's not good for black. So he played rook to d1. And in this position, unlike what you guys would do, black actually gave up. But don't ever give up. But black gave up. The reason he gave up was if he takes this knight, now he's got 2 moves. This one's good for white. Yeah? Good for white, yeah? Checkmate. And the other one is going to end up the same way. And I'm going to go checkmate. And if I don't, I can take your bishop. And the computer's going to say white is incredibly winning. Something like plus 10 or 20, I don't know. Some crazy number. Okay, and obviously black's king isn't very good compared to white's king. So that was a Greek sacrifice that was much more complicated, but it still worked. If you turn the engine on, which I like to do, it plays the Greek sacrifice, and it says white has real good winning chances. And if you don't play the Greek sacrifice and just take, it says equal. It has all zeros next to that move. Nobody has the advantage. And probably black just didn't see this move. Black just thought, I took a piece, he'll take a piece, then I'll start thinking. So he knew about the Greek sacrifice, but he wasn't worried about it. Then when it happened, he was like, oh. Now, because it's such a common theme and we all learned it early, usually we forget about it rather than misevaluate it. It's not like, oh, the Greek sacrifice, that doesn't work. That's not what he was thinking. He was like, oh, I forgot about that. That's what actually happened. There's no way that he thought it was good for him. Nobody wants to walk their king up the board. They want their king nice and safe. So whenever your opponent can Greek sacrifice you, even when it doesn't work, it might work. Because your king's walking up the board. That's not good. Then you need a supercomputer to defend. Okay, now, I've told this story before in previous classes, but you guys weren't here. In the 1600s, and I know I was there was a player named Greco. He was considered the best player in the world. Unfortunately, about half of his games are made up. He would analyze these brilliant checkmates, then he would say, oh, here's a game I played. How are you going to prove him wrong? Right? Did you have the internet to, So half of his games are suspicious. And also, he always beats people and they have no name. He always says, I played somebody, I don't know who it was. Okay, so anyway, I wrote Dufus. I always write NN, no name. Okay, so this is Greco's analysis. Knight F6 is a bad move. Knight C6 is a bad move. Bishop E7 H4 is a weird move. Okay, and now we're ready. You see the distinguishing characteristics here? The knight can go to G5. The bishop can sacrifice on H7. And because it was analysis, unless the guy wasn't lying this time, we got our pawn on H4 already. Oh boy, that's helpful. And in the last position, we saw the queen and bishop here was stopping knight G5. But now it's not stopping knight G5 because our pawn's already here protecting it. So what did white do? Bishop H7. And then white played. It's always the same. Easy to remember. No? Or it's not easy to remember. I don't know. Knight G5 check. Now, if this pawn was on H2, which it normally would be, black would just take that knight and white would cry. But if you take the knight now, you're opening up the rook to your king. That's dangerous. And can you play bishop F5 and defend? No. So this is going to work. Okay, he took anyway. Check. See how it's check? Okay, if he goes back, he went up. If he goes back, I go here. And I'm threatening checkmate and checkmate. Black has two moves that would stop checkmate. Can somebody find one of those moves? F6 or F5, right? Okay. Now, after F6, everybody in the world is going check, 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 except me. I don't do that. I go, That's why I have a beard. Why did my opponent play F6? Because he wants to play king F7 when I check him. So I stop him from playing king F7 with what move? G6. Is he going to play king F7 now? No, and I'm going to go mate. There's no way he can stop me. Okay, anyway, black didn't want to get checkmated. So remember the 9 times out of 10? He walked his king up. Okay, king G6. Check. The king has to go up. Yeah. And now, once again, if you're a good chess player and you're like, am I going to mate my opponent? The answer is yes. Because look where the king is. You can't put your king there. That's terrible. Now, in the game, white actually made a mistake here, although I'm not sure if this was actually a game. White played queen H7. Actually, he could have played queen H3 right away. You can't take the pawn. It's defended. If you go here, can somebody find checkmate in one move? Somebody who's not me? No, then I go king F5. We already did that. You have to check me, but you can't let my king go here.
Queen H7.
Checkmate. And if you play king E4, I also have checkmate. And in fact, this is the checkmate he did, but he did it like later. So instead of playing queen H3, he played queen H7. And then after G6, he did what we said. And then mate. So when your opponent's walking their king up the board, and you sacrificed a bishop, I'll bet on you. You can't walk your king up the board. If you could, people would walk their king up the board, right? If you're walking your king up the board, you better be up a lot of material, like a queen and more. because otherwise you get checkmated. Now, if you're playing an endgame and there's no pieces on the board, then you can walk your king up the board. But when white has pawns and queens and rooks and bishops, you can't walk your king up the board. Okay, and that's why his name is Dufus. Yeah. No, that's his name. Now, you guys are like, wow, the Greek gift. I'm going to do that every game. Okay, you can't do everything every game because people would stop you, or they would do it. Now, here's a game where they did the Greek gift, but it didn't work. It was just a regular gift.
Rufus and Dufus.
Yeah. I actually know their names, but I didn't put what their names were. Okay, so they played a French defense just like in our last ones, but they traded pawns. Now, immediately, you notice something different. Well, I do. The difference is, which I've said in the first three puzzles, now the bishop can go here. That bishop could never go there. Now it can. So there's not going to be a Greek sacrifice this game, except there was. And it didn't work. Okay, so they played very boring. Okay, and this is just a boring position. And white said, oh boy, the Greek sacrifice, I win. Bishop goes to h7, knight goes to g5. It's the same as always. Well, there's no pawn here to block the bishop. There's no knight here to block the bishop. And often there's a white pawn here, so that stops a knight from going to f6, which can't happen here, but it could happen later. So white played this anyway. Now, and I wrote something funny, which you'd have to watch every episode of The Simpsons to get for 30 years. So I've told this in previous lectures, but you guys weren't listening. In a previous lecture, many lectures, there's an episode of The Simpsons where Homer wants to gain weight because the more he weighs, he can get on disability and not go to work. Okay? So he goes to the store where you get muscle, you buy that nonsense that doesn't work. And he buys this thing called Weight Gainer, and it's a huge thing. And the guy looks at him because he's already big, and he says, lucky for you, this stuff don't work. Okay, so lucky for you, that move doesn't work. If it always worked, you could play chess without thinking, but it doesn't work here. So black took the bishop, obviously. And now, it's the 9 times out of 10, this is the one time. Instead of walking your king up and getting mated, you can safely go back. Normally, you can't go back, because after queen h5, you get crushed. Ow. But now, black plays
Bishop h5.
bishop f5, yeah. And now white has nothing. Chess is hard, it doesn't always work. Well, it worked for black. Okay, so white played the move you suggested about an hour ago, g4, right? Then if the bishop takes on g4 or moves away, we checkmate on h7. See, checkmate. Probably black shouldn't do that. Now, this is something I would see in a lot of kids' tournaments. Let's say the black queen was here, was on d7. They'd be like, g4, I can take that. My queen's protecting my bishop. And then you get mated and you're like, oh, I forgot about that. And the reason you forget about it is it's not a threat. Your bishop is stopping it. Okay, that's the Ken West special. He might sue me because trademark infringement on Ken West. Okay. Anyway, so black played bishop to g6 and white has nothing. And now white's just down a bishop. White doesn't have any attack. There's no threats. So black's just like, whatever. And they just played chess. Yeah. And eventually white lost because white was down a piece. White has no attack. Black's got all his pieces out, and black's king's perfectly safe. So that was an example of this Greek sacrifice, but you couldn't play the Greek sacrifice there. And that reminds me of something, and I'll go back to our last example after I show you this other stuff. Okay, so there's a trick in chess, and I'll show you an example of the trick. I'll just give you an example. Oh, I did everything wrong. Okay. Here's an example. Okay, white wants to play bishop takes pawn, and black's like, well, I'll defend my pawn. Nah. And then white takes the pawn anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And black says, what are you doing? And white says, this is what I'm doing. Queen a4, attacking the king and attacking the knight. That trick works about half the time. It works here. And white's not winning, but white didn't lose a piece. He gets his piece back, okay? And people who know that trick that aren't my students, they're like, oh, that trick must always work. And I've had 2 examples in my own life where people did that and it didn't work. Luckily, they were playing me. Okay, and I'll show you those examples. And this was against a player rated 1950, and the game ended immediately. This was in a slow game. So he did the trick here. He's like, oh, I know that trick. I'll take the pawn, you'll take my knight, and I'll check you and get my bishop back. And then I made a move, and he was like, oh. And he started crying. I can actually save my bishop and get out of check. How do I do it? There's not many legal moves, maybe about 7. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only 6. There's 6 legal moves. One of them saves the bishop.
B5.
B5. Tricky, right? Not too tricky. And then he's like, oh, I'm down a bishop, or a knight or whatever. Okay, then many years later, come on. Oh, I'm sorry, he didn't take, he played here. Strange move. And this guy did the same thing. He took my pawn, I took his bishop, he checked me, and he thought he's getting my bishop. Right? And then I went here and he was like, oh. So sometimes tricks that you learn, sometimes they don't work. And sometimes they do work. And most people are like, oh, that trick must always work because I learned it. And I'm like, all right, thanks. So twice people tried a trick they knew, but it didn't work in that position. This happens with the Greek sacrifice. Sometimes it doesn't work, but it usually works. Okay, this is the game frankly versus obviously. I think Nakamura was playing. Now look at this position. You see all the distinguishing characteristics here? We got the bishop h7, we got the knight g5, we got this bishop is hopeless, it can't go here. We got the pawn here. The pawn here is pretty important because another thing black can do when you're Greek gifting him is play knight f6, which defends the mate, but I can take that. So when you see a bishop here that's blocked by 2 pieces and a pawn here defending f6, and you can sacrifice your bishop and go here, that's pretty Greek gifty, right? Okay, so this was a game, and he played the Greek gift, obviously. Now, let me ask you guys a question. I didn't ask you how to defend, I just asked you how to attack. Let's say you had black in this position, and it was your move. And you're like, oh no, here comes the Greek gift. But it's your move. So if you play a5, then the Greek gift is coming. Then you lose. How would you stop all this stuff? H6, or maybe G6, or maybe F5. No, something like that. Probably H6 is the best, yeah. Okay, but it's white's move. So he took knight G5. What does black do based on my teachings? What should black do? King G6. If you play King G8, then you got nothing. You're just going to lose. Okay. So King G6. And this is very similar to the other ones I looked at, but this is really bad for black. Like if it was black's move here, I don't like black's position. All these pieces are terrible. None of them can do anything. So we have a free attack. So the 3 most obvious moves, which I told you guys before, H4, Queen G4, Queen D3 check. And probably they all win. Rawr. Okay, white played H4. He wants to play H5 check. Man, H5 check is mean. I don't know what I would do if my opponent went there. Now, the point of learning things, which I've said before in the lecture, is I want you to do them. And I don't want your opponent to do them to you. And this is the part that I have trouble with. I teach people things, and then their opponent still does it to them. I'm like, I just taught you that. And you're like, yeah, when I do it, I can see it. When they do it, I can't see it. Okay, well, you got to see when your opponent can do it. That's half the battle. So grandmasters, you may have noticed, if you watch their games online, those games never end. Some grandmaster games take 5 or 6 hours for one game, just like when you play. She's like, what? Right. But the reason isn't because they're not good at chess. The reason is they are good at chess. And they're always looking at what their opponent can do. Can my opponent beat me this way? Can my opponent beat me this way? Then when the answer is no, they can make a move. If they see the Greek gift coming, they don't let their opponent do that. So they're thinking a lot to try to stop their opponent. Well, you better think a lot to stop this move. If I was black and I was playing a blitz game, like I had to move in 1 second, I would probably play rook h8 because I'm really afraid of h5. And if I don't play rook h8, I think h5 is coming. I don't see what to do about it. Okay, and he played rook h8. I got lucky. Okay, I don't know what he did, but that's what he did. Okay. Now queen d3 check. Now let's go back. If you play queen d3 check, and I can play f5, and sometimes I can play king h6, but not here. But with the rook on h8, it's even worse, and with the pawn on h4, it's even better. This pawn's great, it defends the knight. This rook's bad, it doesn't defend f7. I wish my rook was here defending f7 now. So now queen d3 check. Black played the only move that makes any sense. Although actually, I guess no moves make any sense.
F5.
Yeah, I would play f5. I'm definitely not going here. And again, when I show you something over and over and over again, you should remember, like you don't want to line your king up with his bishop. Because then everything is winning. I can win your queen whatever way I want to. If I don't want to win your queen, I can probably mate you. I would bet a lot of money if I turned the engine on and announces checkmate. It doesn't care about the queen. There has to be checkmate. I guarantee it without knowing. And we're never going to look. All right, we'll look now. Okay, mate in 5 and, yeah. There has to be mate because look at that king. There has to be mate. Rawr, I'm mad. Okay, and the computer doesn't take the queen. It does this and then it checkmates you. It's like, oh, here. Yeah. See how much fun that is? What's funny is this would be mate, except there's a queen on d8. So it takes the queen so it can play mate. It's a good reason, right? Yeah, the queen was defending that. Yeah. Okay, so everything's mate, so that's bad. I mean, it's good if you have white. Okay, so he played f5, of course. And now we have a lot of good moves. We could take this. We could take en passant with check. We could play queen g3. And probably they all win. And the reason is, this is all terrible, and this is the terriblest. Your king's walking up the board. Boo! He took with check. Black made the only move that makes any sense. King takes pawn. He's in check, so he takes the pawn. And now we check on f3, and this is unusual because normally there's a rook on f8. But when there's no rook on f8, that means we're coming in here. Man, that's not good. So this would be really, 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 really bad for black. So he tried to run away. King e7, and he got chased. And he tried to run away. And he got chased. And he tried to run away. And he got chased. And then he's like, all right, I've had enough of this. Okay. So now black gave up. What? Yeah, well, actually, he will get mated, but it takes a while. He actually gave up here. He's like, oh, this is horrible. So if he goes here, we can check with the rook. If he goes here, we have a very funny retreat. Usually when you're baiting somebody, you're going forward. Yeah, you can retreat. Uh-oh. That's pretty good for white, isn't it? If you play b5, I mate you. And if you don't play b5, I mate you on the same square. Right? Okay, so you have to play king a5. Oh, terrible. And then check. Man, tough tournament. So the guy castled, but his king went for a walk. Yeah, and his other pieces are like, oh, we'll stay here where we belong, right at home. So you can see that white's going to win. So probably what black has to do is start giving all of his pieces away. And then he won't get mated, but he'll be down a lot of pieces. So what does the computer say? It says white's up a lot, and you have to give your knight away.
Mate in 4.
Well, mate in 4 is if you play the wrong move. If you play the right move, white's only up plus 10, plus 11. Okay. Usually in chess jargon, plus 1 is like a pawn. So plus 8, 9 would be like a queen. So the computer thinks white's a queen ahead equivalent because the king's running around. Terrible. Okay, so in those examples, not all of them, in most of them, the Greek gift worked. And you have to recognize it. You can sacrifice on h7, the black king's walking up the board, and at least the knight and the queen start attacking, both of them. And when your opponent can defend h7, then the Greek gift doesn't work. The two ways to defend h7, one of them we looked at, that was playing bishop f5, bishop f5. And the other one, which we never saw, is if black can somehow play knight f6. That also would defend mate. Although in none of the examples we saw black could do that. Here there's no legal way to do it. And the other examples, white's pawn was on e5, so he's stopping that. So if your opponent plays bishop f5 or knight f6, your Greek gift's not going to work. If they can't, it's probably going to work. And for those of you at home, if you have databases and computers and stuff, there's a very famous game played, I believe 1980, but I could be a year off, could be 79, 81, between Karpov and Miles. Karpov was the world champion. Miles was the best player in Great Britain. And Miles allowed the Greek gift sacrifice. Karpov could have played it. And it was really complicated. It's not clear if it worked. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. And Karpov didn't play it. He played some boring move, because he's a boring player. And he ended up losing Karpov. And when the game ended, they talked to Tony Miles, and they said, what did you think of this sacrifice? And he said, oh, I knew Karpov wouldn't play that. I didn't even analyze it. He said, Karpov doesn't do that. So some grandmasters, they're not sacrificing a bishop and hoping they win. They just win. So he says, Karpov's never going to sacrifice on h7, so I didn't even look at it. He was right. Karpov didn't even think of it. And in these examples where white's clearly winning, Karpov would do that. But when it's not clear and you're like, I wonder if I'm winning, Karpov's not going to do it. And some people are like that. They never do anything. And some people are always sacrificing whether it works or not. So if Miles was playing another grandmaster who likes to sacrifice, he would have expected the sacrifice. He was playing Karpov, so he's like, he's not going to do that. And then later, Karpov blundered a pawn for nothing and lost. It was really strange. And the funny thing about that game, the reason that game is famous, not because of what I said, is because black played this on the first move.
What?
Yeah, that's a true story. So if you look in your database and find Karpov Miles with this, it's famous because he played a6, because it's a strange move. Not only did black win, but white had the bishop h7 sacrifice and didn't make it because he was worried about it. So chess is hard, right? No. You can play a6 and win. Who would have thunk it? Not me. Okay, but Karpov had the last laugh because he's still playing chess in his 60s, and Miles died pretty young. When you play moves like a6, you don't live long. You got to be crazy to play that. Okay? The truth hurts. All right, and so forth. You guys all agree? As long as you agree. Good shirt. I like that. All right. Oh, next class is at 1:30. The kids' class is at 3. And you guys at home can take a nap. Bye, everyone. Hooray.